Okay, well, it's been a difficult week for Bradford City, and joining us now to discuss everything to do with the Bantams, it's the width of a post, Jason Mckeown. Jason, thank you very much for joining us.
No problem. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. Well, it has been a bit of a difficult few days, hasn't it? We'll start with that Northampton game at the weekend. City lost 3-1. Another home defeat. Pretty disappointing.
Yeah, it was a bit of a rude awakening, to be honest. Obviously, going into that game, we were 2 points behind Northampton in fourth place. The expectation and hope really was that if we could win that game, move above Northampton into the automatic promotion places and almost sort of crown the promising start to the season and Mark Hughes in terms of this is that moment now where we really kick on. But instead, we saw a really humbling defeat where we were very much outplayed in the game. The scoreline flattered only Northampton. It certainly flattered ourselves, I should say, not Northampton. In terms of they should have won by more goals on the day, and we were fortunate really to only lose the way we did. It was just such a one-sided game in the end, and we just came nowhere near. And I think it really underline kind of how far we still have to go yet if we are to be serious promotion contenders, and certainly in terms of automatic promotion contenders, because they were streets ahead of us really, and it would just really put us into place, I think, really where we are at this moment in time.
Yeah, I got a feeling reading through your match report, it was kind of one of those moments where you look at it and think, well, if we're thinking of ourselves as automatic promotion contenders, and then when you come up against Northampton playing as well as they did, it can put things in perspective there. What did you make of City's actual system? Because you've been criticising, obviously, the 4-2-3-1 setup, and it just doesn't seem to be working, does it, especially at home at the moment?
Yeah, it's a formation we've had for a number of years in terms of different managers like Derek Adams and Mark Truman played it before Mark Hughes, so we are quite well versed to it. I think the big thing in the past has been that the wide players and the forward players haven't really got into the game as much, and it's probably less of that at the moment, but the big problem we seem to have is in the centre of midfield, and Mark Hughes is obviously keen and commendably so to play out from the back and to play football the right way, so that means playing it through the two holding midfielders, Alex Gilliard and Richie Smallwood, and at this moment in time, and in quite a few games this season, they've really struggled to have that influence and to use the ball well, to set up attacks. They've been a little bit too isolated. They've struggled to find players in front of them, and that's just really limited what we can do. And on top of that, when we on the turnover, when we lose the ball, when the opposition come forward, certainly on Saturday against Northampton, they came through them really easily. Northampton were really good at playing triangles of possession, really making sure they were quite close together when they were on the attack and giving themselves options around them, and they just played through us with far too much ease really, and that was a big concern because you look at that formation, we kind of went a little bit more direct than normally because I think the weather conditions were atrocious on Saturday, really bad with the rain and stuff, and it was one of them days where you think, you know what, you just got to get the ball up a bit more direct and bypass moves a little bit, but then you're looking at on like I say on those turnovers when we lose possession to make sure those two players are there to win the ball back higher at the park, and it didn't happen. So that's a real problem at this moment in time, and I think the other issue is that the 4-2-3-1 just doesn't seem to work well when it comes to chasing the game, and we saw it on Tuesday before we move on to that as well, but in terms of when we're behind, really struggled with that 4-2-3-1 formation, and I think it was a bit of a surprise for most supporters on Saturday that at half-time when we were 2-0 down to Northampton and looking very much second best, that there wasn't radical changes from Hughes in terms of switching the formation, bringing players on and trying to go a little bit more bodies up front really, because the 4-2-3-1 just wasn't working and certainly didn't suit chasing the game.
Is Hughes being stubborn?
I think it's an interesting point at the moment because firstly, I think all managers get accused of being stubborn, and it's almost like a badge of honour. They all get it, don't they? I think he believes in the system and playing in a certain way, and he can point to the fact that for large parts of the season, that system has worked really, really well. So going away from those principles, I can understand why he'd be reluctant to do that. But I think you sometimes have to adapt in games or look at it and think, well, what was working a couple of weeks ago maybe is not working as effectively right now. What do you do to change that? And one of the big things we sort of believed going into the season with what we'd done in the summer in terms of the transfer activity was we built a really big squad and lots of real quality options. And that should mean that in-game situations when things are maybe not going to plan, there should be opportunities there to really change it around in terms of change formation, bring on different players as well, bring some quality on from the bench. And I think that's probably the surprising thing at the moment, because if the plan's not working, that happens. Any manager can find that their best laid plans don't necessarily go well, but what do you do to change that? And that's the interesting bit now. We've got a little bit of a gap before the next game, and Mark Hughes talked a bit on Tuesday after the Salford game in terms of the form and the way we're playing is maybe plateauing a little bit at this moment in time, and that's something to look at. So you do wonder now if maybe he really has to change it now, and he sees that as well.
Absolutely, yeah. It's a couple of weeks, isn't it, till the Leyton Orient game. Moving on to the other night, then it was a 1-0 loss to Salford in the Football League Trophy. How was the performance, Jason? A bit disappointing again that they've crashed out, and that's the cup competition's done for another season.
Yeah, it was a disappointing performance. Again, I think like on Saturday, you couldn't really complain that we'd lost the game. We didn't necessarily deserve anything from it. It was a bit of a nothing game at 0-0, and then it was almost waiting for who's going to make the first mistake or get through, really. And because it was two teams playing very similar systems, trying to pass out from the back, not take over risks. But I think as a half progressed, I think Salford got a bit of joy and realised that defensively City had a bit of a problem with Jan Songo currently filling in for Romany Critchlow, who's out injured at the moment, limited our ability to play out from the back because that's not really Jan Songo's game, and he's also playing on the wrong side for a right-footed defender. He's playing as a left-sided centre-back, so it's just not suiting him anyway. And they got some joy there, got the goal, and in the second half we pushed on, but never really like we were going to equalise, never really got that sustained level of pressure where you think there's a goal coming. We had a few chances and we did it at the post, but it really just felt a bit too sporadic. And again, that 4-2-3-1 formation was exposed as one that when you are chasing a game, it just doesn't really seem to suit, because we never got in the position where you felt Salford were feeling uncomfortable and really under pressure. For them, it was quite comfortable over the 90 minutes.
Just to pick out some individuals as well, Verdane Oliver, who you referenced in your match report as well, and it just doesn't seem to be quite working for him at City at the moment, does it?
It is, and it's a shame for him, really, because I think at first when he arrived, I think there's probably a few question marks about his attitude, and maybe he was almost thinking, well, why am I doing in League Two really at this moment in time, especially playing for a team that is completely different to the Gillingham setup he'd had for the last few years, where he'd absolutely thrived. But then he seemed to get going and got his head down, and albeit struggling to get in ahead of Andy Cook, but had made some decent contributions from the bench. But I think it just seems to be fading a little bit again as well. And watching him on Tuesday, to me, it felt like such a big opportunity for him, because yes, Andy Cook's playing really well at the moment and scoring quite a few goals, but that there's a chance there to share that workload, and you come into that game, you get a chance to start. It's a strong City team apart from that, really, so it's not like he's playing with reserve players or anything like that, or anything like that, and he just really struggled to make much of an impact and to be effective. And a part of me just feels sorry for him, because as I say, he's a target man. He thrives on high balls up to him. He wants to do knockdowns to the people. He wants that sort of bodies around him, which is not what City like to do and play. But equally, you think at the moment you've got to show a lot more now. You're here on a 3-year deal. You can't be happy with the situation. You should be desperate to prove yourself and just try and stick a place in the team. And you're just not doing it at the moment. So it's disappointing.
And of course, with that exit in another cup competition, do you think that'll have an impact on Hughes' ability to be able to strengthen in January financially?
It seems to be that way. There's been talk, certainly after the FA Cup exit to Harrogate, that financial blow of losing and going out the competition so early was something that will be felt in January. And this competition is one where the prize money is pretty decent. I think you got 20 grand if you won on Tuesday night. It goes to 40 grand next round, 50 grand. And if you do have a good run, obviously you can get all the way to Wembley. You could make a lot of money, and that would be useful in January. So I think that's going to have some sort of impact. I think if you're talking about a week ago in terms of City in January window, there wouldn't be too much concern, really, because the squad looks quite strong and we're going along quite nicely, and you're thinking maybe just one or two players and it'd be okay. And probably in a way that is still the case, but I think the need and urgency to sign some better players, certainly in the centre midfield, someone to partner Richie Smallwood, now just feel greater than ever, and you need a bit of quality to do that, and therefore the money there would be needed. So it's going to be an interesting one when you do get to that point. And I think as well, the other side of it is you're looking at a lot of players now who are just not involved in the team, who are not getting near to it, and even when the form's not great and players in the team aren't doing their job, these other players are still not getting in. So you would expect to see some outgoings in January, and probably to trim that wage bill a little bit so you can bring someone in there. So it's probably a window where we're not going to be on the front foot in the same way, probably more relying on getting a few players out, then bringing someone at that point then. So probably one where we have to be quite patient.
Absolutely. Well, it's a couple of weeks until the next game, but at least there's a World Cup to keep you entertained in the meantime. Jason, thank you very much for joining us. We look forward to speaking to you again in the future.
Cheers.